Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Ink and Fig. My name is Alex, and today I wanted to talk to you about something that has been bothering me for some time. I have been struggling with figuring out how to rate my books. This doesn't really seem like it should be that big of a deal, and yet it vexes me so badly, but I think I have finally nailed it, and I would love to take you through the culmination of this journey with me. Like a number of people that I've seen on BookTube, I have been using Cawpile through the majority of the year. This was a rating system developed by Book Roast over on her channel. I will link the video for that down below or up in the cards, whatever. Wherever it pops up, it'll pop up, and you can go and take a look at that if you want to. The problem that I have been finding with Cawpile, for me specifically, is that my books usually end up coming up with a much higher rating than I would give them holistically, sort of just off the cuff. And I'm wondering, I'm sitting here sort of looking at a 1-star book and wondering how it managed to scrape by 2.5 or 3 stars. And there's like a little cheat sheet on the spreadsheet and everything, so you can see what exactly you're giving the book for each of these categories that you're supposed to rate to get your star rating. And for some reason, I just keep pulling out really highly scored books. And then books that I would consider to be 5 stars are sometimes barely scraping 4 or 4.5. And for me, that upsets me, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I'm giving a book the truest rating that I possibly could if I were giving it holistically rather than through this sort of mathematical thing. Not to say that Cawpile doesn't work for a lot of people, because it absolutely does, and I love that for them. It's just, for me, I find that there's some really big dissonance between what I want to give a book and what that math system is giving me. So I had to sit down with myself and I was like, okay, if I were to assign a word value to each of the stars as I think of them in my head, what would that look like? And how would that work with half stars? So basically, I took inspiration from that sort of holistic chart, the little cheat sheet on the last page of the Cawpile spreadsheet, and used that as inspiration, although not exactly a step-by-step guide for me to figure out what exactly my ratings are supposed to look like. So I did that, and I have now a list of my star ratings and how I got there. So I will be able to take you through this and show you kind of how I think about books and how I am viewing them when I'm rating them, because the things that I might rate 5 stars, you might rate 3, and vice versa. We can have very different opinions, and so I wanted to show you where my opinions came from. So the first thing I wanted to do was take a look at some of the main things that make up a book and how I weight those things when I'm looking at doing a rating. So I thought that for the most part, the criteria for Cawpile is pretty spot on. So I basically have 3 tiers of things that I look at when I'm looking at how I'm going to be rating a book. The stuff at the top tier is going to have more weight than the stuff at the bottom tier. Up at the top tier, the first thing that's going to go up there is characters. A good character will 100% make a book for me. If it's not good otherwise, if the characters are fantastic, it's going to get a higher rating than it otherwise would have. Atmosphere is the next thing that we look at on Cawpile. I sort of look at that as like the vibes of a book. Now, for me, vibes are everything. Vibes are what keep me reading and keep me going. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with plot or intrigue or any of that. If the vibes are good, I'm going to want to keep opening up that book. So that is going also into the top tier. The next thing I look at is, of course, the writing. As a writer, as someone with a degree in writing, writing is an absolute clincher for me. The writing must be good, and I'm going to go into more on this later when I start giving you some examples of books with my ratings. Writing, absolutely top tier. The plot of a book, weirdly enough, does not matter that much to me. I've seen a lot of literature get by on just vibes alone, and plot isn't necessarily the most important thing to me. So weirdly enough, plot is going on my bottom tier. Intrigue is the next thing I wanted to look at, and that also, it does get me, but it's not quite as high as some of the other things on this list. So Intrigue is going to go into my mid-tier. The logic of a piece is probably the thing that can piss me off the most about a piece of writing. If it's not following its own rules, if like the plot just flat out doesn't make sense, I'm not going to rate it very highly. But also, you have things like magic realism, you have some things that are really high concept, and sometimes the logic really takes a couple extra steps to notice. So I don't want to underrate a book if I'm simply not smart enough to follow the logic, but you can also tell the difference when a book is being quite, let's say, artsy versus just not knowing what it's doing. For those reasons, logic is also a mid-tier criteria for me. And lastly, there's just enjoyment. Enjoyment of a book is extremely high up there for me. If I didn't like it, I'm probably not gonna finish it. And if I didn't like it, I'm probably not going to rate it very high. So enjoyment is also going to be top tier. So with all those things in mind, I would love to show you my actual 5-star rating system. And I'm gonna give you some examples along the way to show you exactly what qualifies as a bad book and a good book according to me. I've also included half-star ratings in here because sometimes a book is just like missing the vibe on one step or another, and I think that those half stars can really be quite meaningful. So, starting off at the bottom with a half star, this basically means that I've finished the book, but I'm not happy about it. My rating for a half star is, why was this published? These books like this exist and they're not good. They basically miss the mark on absolutely everything. To compare that with a 1-star, a 1-star I have called awful. And the difference between a 1-star and a half star I can show you with my 1-star example, which is Spark by Y.C. Leung. I read this earlier this year, and this is by and far the worst book I have ever read. It misses everything. The writing is awful. The plot is, held together with duct tape and hope. The characters are terrible. The vibes are almost non-existent. Like, it makes no sense. It's very poorly put together in basically every regard. However, the difference between this being a 1-star and being a half star is that I can tell that she was trying. She really put her all into this book, and I think that she was just failed on more of beta reading front rather than by sort of her own gumption to write a good book. She really wanted this to be good, and that effort was definitely tangible in the work. It's just that absolutely nothing passed the bar, and that's really too bad for her and for her debut novel. But you know what? Books like this exist, and they're important to also talk about. So this is my example for a 1-star. So crawling ever further up the ladder, we have 1.5 stars. This is what I would consider bad. So Spark was a train wreck, top to bottom, but it had that little bit of effort to it, which is why I rated it higher than a half star, because frankly, why was this published was a line that crossed my mind several times while I was reading that book, but also there was effort, and I have to count that for something. With a bad book, you're maybe crossing the threshold on one of those things on my list of criteria. So maybe the characters were really good, but absolutely everything else was a train wreck. Or maybe the book had a really good theme to it and it really was trying to get a good message across. Then that'll give it an extra half star for, but usually this just isn't a good situation. A 2-star book for me is not good. These kinds of books are difficult for me to explain, so I'm going to show you my 2-star book, and that is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. Now, first of all, I would like to quantify that this is an unpopular opinion. A lot of people liked this book. A lot of people thought it was mid. I don't think I've seen a whole lot of people share my opinion of it being so low. Now, 2 stars in this case. We had pretty good writing, pretty good characters. The plot depends on whose perspective you were reading it from, in my opinion. I don't think the modern day plot in this had any legs whatsoever, but the past plot was actually doing pretty good. I would have enjoyed to read the whole book if it was that story instead, but that's not what we got. And then the ending was extremely clunky, super transparent, and preachy. It was not good. I DNF'd this for a period of about 6 months to a year and then forced myself to finish it last July. Last July. I finished it, so I can give it that much. But it just didn't meet the mark. I had no fun reading this, and I do not want to read it again. So, not good, unfortunately. 2 stars. Now we're moving up to what would look like the halfway point, 2.5 stars. 2.5 stars I have called needs improvement. So, in the case of The Lost Apothecary, I'm not sure where I would even suggest improvement. I just don't care for it that much. I don't think that it would be redeemable in my eyes in any way. So I'm not even going to give it the time of day. If a book was that bad, but had something really good that I wanted it to like buff up and try to make a better name for itself, that's where I would give it 2.5 stars, because I do think it's redeemable. It just needs a lot of work. So for me, 3 stars is pretty middle of the ground. 3 stars is fine. No horrific complaints. It wasn't fabulous. Pretty forgettable in most cases, which actually, to illustrate that, I had a lot of trouble finding an example for a 3-star book when I was trying to put this video together. And I did it, but I kind of forgot that I read it. And incidentally, I did rate it a 3 stars. And that book is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This book had a lot going for it. The writing was good. The plot was very interesting. The vibes were actually really good, and I think the vibes were what actually got me through this book, because frankly, I hated the main character. He was so unsavory that I just kind of got mad whenever I picked the book up. But I think what really saved this book was the big plot twist toward the end. And this is how those weighting systems work. Like, plot, for me, is very low tier, but because it was kind of so good in this one, it actually bumped it up from being a lower rated book. So this would be my example for a 3-star read. Now we're starting to move up into like the juicy stuff. The bottom of the barrel is stuff that we sort of like don't want to have to muck through, but we have to get there in order to get to the good stuff. So that's where we're getting now. A 3.5-star book for me is good. Again, kind of unremarkable, slightly more memorable than a 3-star book, but nothing special. A 4-star is what I would consider really good. Now, my book for a 4-star is If We Were Villains. The only things that made this less than perfect was I thought that the characters they weren't terribly sympathetic. I thought they were all extremely full of themselves, and the plot did tend to drag in some places, so it didn't get a perfect score from me, but so much of this book is spectacular. The plot was fantastic, the writing was fantastic, the vibes were immaculate. It's just that a couple things dragged this down from being a 5-star. So this, for me, is what a 4-star book looks like. 4.5 stars, I'm sure you can tell, is almost perfect. This is where one of those criteria is going to pull it back just a little bit. So a 5-star is what I'm calling incredible. These are books that I can find almost no flaw with, that I've enjoyed cover to cover and just think are absolute bangers. The best one that I can show you for this has got to be Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This series is my favorite series of all time. I think the writing is spectacular, it's funny, the characters are all immaculately written, whether I like them or not. The vibes, again, immaculate. The plot is actually really good. I love the themes and the subtext and the stuff that we get into with this. And just, these are books that I can expound upon ad nauseum, are 5-star reads. Gideon the Ninth has been and always will be one of my absolute favorites, so this is a very good example of what a 5-star read looks like for me. So that here it is once again. That is what my star rating system finally looks like. I feel so relieved to have this under my belt now because I haven't really known how to rate or score my books in any way as I've been reading them, which is kind of annoying because we talk a lot about star ratings and I would like to get into more meaningful reviews and things like that, but I really need to know exactly where my reviews and criteria for rating books lies, and now I have figured that out for myself. My hope with this video is that this helped you figure out what your star rating system might look like, if perhaps CAWPILE wasn't working for you, or if you've just been trying to sort of quantify what a more holistic and maybe like by the vibes rating would look like, because largely I rate books by the vibes. So this is what I came up with. I hope it's helpful to you. And that is where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here as always. Comment down below and let me know what a 5-star read looks like for you, or if you're feeling spicy, let me know some 1-star reads for you because I would love, love, love to hear the tea on that. Go ahead and like this video if you liked it so that other people can come and join the fun. Subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed so that you don't miss any of our future videos. And follow me on all of my social media at Ink and Fig so that you can keep up with my life in other spaces on the internet. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next one. Bye.